Welcome back. Dr. Luis Daniel Muñoz is my guest. He's running for governor in Rhode Island as a Democrat. Now, you were in with me last time around as an independent. Why the switch to the Democrat Party? Why?
Because I think it's time for Rhode Island to actually see programmatic change. Running as an independent, it was clear to me that we had to challenge cronyism and corruption, and we've seen that across both parties. Right now, it's really about bringing Rhode Islanders together and making sure that we address the challenges in healthcare, education, and in supporting local economies. All
right, now you're an MD. You want to jump right from the medical world into politics. By the way, it's been done before. We've got some doctors who are members of Congress. Don Kachiri went from the business world right into politics without running for lower offices. But you've heard that people say, why don't you run for something lower first, get your feet wet, work your way up? Why not?
Well, people say that a lot in life, climb the ladder. But what's the ladder designed for? In Rhode Island, it's time to talk about programmatic changes. We're in the middle of a COVID-19 crisis. Isn't it time to have people who understand science, who understand how to respond to this pandemic? Not only that, but I grew up in Central Falls. I saw the struggles, economic and other struggles as well. That informed my decision to run to go for medicine.
Yep.
And then ultimately is informing my decision to bring medicine, technology, and my understanding of industry to the table here and to affect change.
Seth Magaziner, he went from the business world right to politics too, I guess, as a treasurer, although he could say, well, at least I was treasurer, now I'm running for governor. But you know what I mean. Everybody else has kind of, paved the path, one step, then another step. It's very difficult to do what you're trying to do.
I mean, coming from a working background, a marginalized community, and having that lived experience is very different from the candidates I'm running against. That lived experience, that struggle, must inform the steps that we take to actually create a stronger Rhode Island.
I heard you say that earlier in one of the stories, that you come from a poor community, you have this struggle. In your party, the Democrat Party now, we had Roosevelts and Kennedys, and they identified with the working man just fine, even though they were very wealthy people. So why is that a selling point?
Yeah, I mean, power structures of privilege, people who come from privilege have historically tried to appropriate movements of progress. But at the end of the day, it's time for working, the marginalized, and the poor in this state, the 95% who live paycheck to paycheck, to inform the policy decisions and the investments that are going to be made in the next 10 years.
Let's just flesh that out. The Roosevelts were very rich people, yet they managed to do, some people think, the greatest president ever. The New Deal, Social Security. The Kennedys identified with working class people, very wealthy people. So why do you think that makes a difference, whether or not you come from money or you come from no money, that you can help the average man? Why?
Let's talk about context of history. In the time that those individuals ran, frankly, the civil rights movement hadn't even been at its peak. It really had not informed the changes that we've seen in our school systems and our healthcare system. Yeah. We live in a different time, and in a time where the working and those who have lived the struggle should inform the decisions that we're making.
Let's talk about why you became a Democrat. And I want, listen, I ask all the candidates this. We have liberal Democrats, far left Democrats, centrists. We have conservative Democrats. We even have some Democrats up at the State House who would be a Republican in another state. Where do you fall in the pantheon of Democrats? Where do I place you?
Place me on the side of the working and the marginalized.
No, that's such a talk away. Now, come on, where do I put you? Are you a centrist? Are you the left of center, right of center? Why not answer that question straight?
Because those are labels that are set up for a political game that works against working families. We need to talk about the 95% of Rhode Islanders that are caught in a top-down struggle gene, the connected and the not connected. We've seen cronyism infest that state house. It's time to change. It's time to push back.
I understand that, but you're trying to make that's a bad thing. Matt Brown is a far left Democrat. He doesn't mind telling you that. I read his manifesto. He's far left. I know where he is. McKee might say I'm a centrist. You know where he is. Why not tell me where you are?
Because I'm happy to answer policy questions and let the public decide where I am. But what I can say is, if you strip my experience, you strip my MD, I am a Rhode Islander, Central Falls warrior whose heart bleeds for hope for the future, and I'm going to fight for Rhode Islanders.
Okay, so let me ask you, what issue would you be considered far left on? Are you tax the rich? Are you defund the police?
It's interesting you say that. I do think that those who make $450,000 a year should pay their fair share of taxes. I do believe we live in a country where we've seen $1.6 trillion redistributed, to use that phrase, that word, to the top 1%. It's time for everybody to pay their fair share. We all have to be invested in future generations.
Do you think 450 is rich? Because I can get plenty of guys who say, I make $450,000. I pay $125,000 in taxes. I take home only $275 in the end.
It's about fairness. And so relative wealth, we can talk. We all stand on our relative hills. $450,000 or more a year is relatively wealthy compared to those that are making less than $24,000 a year, those who are earning minimum wage and barely able to survive in this state.
All right. Where would you be liberal on? What issue could I say? Well, you're liberal on issues. You're not defund the police, are you?
So what I believe, since you asked the question, I believe it's about fiscal accountability. We see the budget in the Providence Police Department, and if you remove salaries to the side and health benefits and all that, and we get to the core of what those line items look like,
Right.
in a time where we know that those who are experiencing mental health issues are 16 times more likely to be arrested, the city wants to invest $600,000 in a diversion program for mental health workers to help. There's another line item of $866,000 for riot gear. Do we have that many riots in Rhode Island where we would apply more funds for riot gear than we would to address mental health?
Well, it's nice to have when you need it. We had a riot. It'd be nice to have that equipment. They burned the police cars and everything. We all saw that. Why would you be against that? Sometimes we have very powerful weapons we don't use until we need them.
We can quantify the demand, the need for mental health, not only in our schools in terms of the resources that are needed, but in the homeless population. And again, a population that disproportionately is arrested as a result of having police officers that don't understand how to de-escalate those situations. So again, comparing line items, we have a fiscal responsibility to invest in areas where our community can benefit from. It's about fiscal accountability, Gene.
All right, so the question, are you defund the police or not? That has become a litmus test for your party.
Let the litmus test folks do the litmus test. I am about talking specifically about the changes we need to make, about where we should be applying funds and how to effectively make Rhode Island better.
Where would you be a conservative? Where might you be right of center on some issues? That might surprise me.
Again, Gene, let others decide what left and right is. I am the candidate fighting
Okay,
for Rhode
you've already
Islanders.
said that you don't want me to pigeonhole you and put you here. So right, you told me ask the issues. What are you liberal on? What would you be conservative on? What might your position might surprise me that you're right of center on this or moderate? Is there something you can give me?
I don't see it in terms of left or right. My positions are on the website, governor2022.com. People can look and judge me for themselves. At the end of the day, where I judge myself is I am fighting for Rhode Islanders.
Okay, if you become the governor next year, you'll probably deal with the Providence school takeover. That's going to be basically you're running the school system. What would you do differently?
Yeah, I mean, I think that communities should inform how education systems are being transformed. We have an education funding formula in the state that is archaic. It's relatively new, but we have to remember Pawtucket sued the state to have an equitable funding formula. We had to wait about 15 years later before there was a formula, and then the way the formula works, the cities and towns and states share in terms of how much investment's going into the school districts. But the problem is that cities and towns have different property taxes. And so what that results in is in a gap in funding, where cities and towns can level fund how much they're giving to school districts, and the state is not compensating. We have a constitutional obligation in the state of Rhode Island to provide an education that equates to equal opportunity for all students, and the dollars have to follow that mission.
All right, so as the de facto superintendent of the Providence schools, I'm not sure how much progress has been made there because they got hit with the pandemic just as they were starting to turn things around. Do you see something now that you'd like to change? If you were in charge, would you have given the teachers that contract? Do you consider them bullies, the teachers union, like the education commissioner does? Tell me about that.
I think we need to empower teachers to work with students and families, and collectively parents, teachers, and students can inform the direction that the school system should take. We have professional development requirements for teachers. Would I love to see that replaced with community service for teachers to be more embedded in the communities they're teaching? Absolutely. I also believe that we should, we live in a time of COVID-19. We need to talk about having a remote option for teachers who have concerns for their safety and the safety of students. We need to talk about actually implementing mental health resources in schools. And if we have to take from other budgets in order to empower students and teachers to have those mental health resources, then now's the time to do it.
Let's bang out a couple of lightning round questions, just the short answers if you could. Would you work to cut the sales tax?
It's really interesting. If we start talking about the wealthy in this state, those that make $450,000 paying their fair share of taxes, I think we can start to have conversations about how far we need to push certain taxes like sales tax. Can we actually address them? But I will say we have a regressive tax that disproportionately affects small businesses. It's called the tangible asset tax. It is regressive. We need to find ways of lowering that and completely removing it altogether. And I would like to tackle that tax before anything else.
Would you keep the truck toll gantries up from the Raimondo era?
We have big issues that we need to address in Rhode Island, like infrastructure around healthcare, like our education funding formula. The priority for me is not to come into office and immediately talk about tolls.
Well, I know, but that's a legitimate question. A lot of people are concerned about that. It's very controversial. We're the only state to toll trucks that way. Would you keep the gantries up or take them down? You can't just skirt that one.
No, I mean, what I'm focused on, the gantries are up.
Yeah.
My focus today is on ensuring that tolls are not being applied to residential vehicles.
Okay.
My biggest concern is those are the walls we need to make sure aren't built up.
The truck gantries stay up, and you want to make sure we're not going to toll cars.
Correct.
All right. Now, would you legalize regular marijuana?
Yeah, so I've always been a proponent of the use of medical cannabis. In terms of legalizing recreational cannabis, yes, my concern is right now limited licenses focused on large corporations, so essentially monopolies, are the path that legislators seem to want to take. We should have local economies empowered with an opportunity to have the licenses to build businesses around it. Why? Because ultimately, when it comes to safety concerns around marketing and how that marketing influences youth, I think that those who live in the communities are going to be more predisposed to protecting how they send messages out in a recreational cannabis arena.
Driver's licenses for undocumented aliens.
Yes, first day.
You would give that?
Absolutely.
Now,
because at the end of the day, New Jersey showed us that limited licenses can empower those who have been disenfranchised, who contribute to our tax base, an opportunity to go to work and to feed their families.
A driver's license is considered a privilege. Would you give that privilege to someone who broke the law to get here?
So if we're talking about breaking the law and having a felony, having a record, that is very different from the question.
It's not a felony, but crossing the line is, coming here illegally is illegal. Would you give that privilege to someone who, someone could argue, doesn't belong here?
I believe in human rights, and I believe in people the opportunity to live in dignity, to feed their families, to have an opportunity to survive in a country. We can't abandon people and push them into the shadows. We know historically what happens when you do that to communities. Not everyone that comes to this country, by the way, crosses a border and does so without permission. We have refugee communities that are here and that also need opportunities to go to work and feed their families. So that's a very large umbrella that's been painted. I want to make sure that we're always acting from the platform of human rights.
Okay, so these are questions that every candidate is going to get. We ran through a litany of them. What is the one thing different about you? What is the one issue you're talking about that nobody else is talking about? What's the one thing that you want to grab and say, come with me, here's what we're going to do?
Well, it's everything I'm talking about. We need to connect the dots. We are talking about investing in healthcare infrastructure in a time where not only is healthcare expensive, but COVID-19 showed us that we didn't even have the capacity to run tests. We need to build infrastructure that provides a free community health system for all Rhode Islanders, reduces the cost burden of healthcare for working families who, even when they're working 2 jobs, are pushed back into poverty because they can't afford their healthcare bills. We also need a supplemental wage program. Gene, we talk a lot about minimum wage, but minimum wage is very much a poverty trap where people can have 2 minimum wage jobs and because of healthcare costs can't make it. We need to talk about the state using the federal dollars and that premium payments phrase that's been designed to provide more money for wages and create a supplemental wage program. So minimum wage earners in the state, 15,000 of them, can have the state support their hourly wages and then bring those individuals to Rhode Island Promise. Let's get them skills.
So you're saying the state would then write a check to these individual people or families every month and supplement their income?
To the small businesses, Gene, because it's about connecting our support for local economies and micro businesses, which there are about 30,000 of, and the employees that they hire, which are minimum wage earners.
You're saying that the people who do the work, who do the cooking and the cleaning, you want to supplement their wages, and you see that as a connection to small business. But you want the state to give them free money.
So I want the state to empower local economies to have a capacity to provide livable wages for the minimum wage earners, improve the quality of their service because they'll have employees that only need 1 job, and make sure that we move away from supporting large corporations that don't care about the working in this state and supporting local economies and minimum wage earners that are actually going to build this state back.
Well, everything you've just articulated sounds like you're a progressive to me. Sounds like I'd put you left of center. Do you object to that?
You can judge me how you will, Gene. I put myself from the position of I want to help all Rhode Islanders, and this is the path to help.
Well, listen, reporters do that. We categorize and put people, we write stories that are this big or that big. Is this for you? Do you enjoy this? Do you enjoy the give and take? Do you enjoy being challenged? Do you enjoy stuff like this? You want to go into politics, the light shines on you, and sometimes it's not very flattering or very pleasant.
The fight that drives me is the fight for the future, knowing that the world that we're building is a world that my daughter and the next 7 generations, your next 7 generations, mine, can have a safety net that helps them bounce back.
Before I leave, I just have about 30 seconds. Are you going to the Federal Hill Parade? A little controversial.
It is controversial. It's interesting. 1792, Tamani Hall essentially created this Columbus Day that we have today. It wasn't an Italian American that created it. That was a political organization that was corrupt, in fact. And what I find interesting is they attached Italian Heritage Day under the guise of a colonizer that was more palatable to Americans that wanted to rationalize the abuses against indigenous communities. I stand with the Italian community. I will be on the Hill, not in the march, and I will be supporting Trattoria Zuma and Armando Biseglia because it is my favorite restaurant.
All right. Well, listen, I took a tally. Most of the politicians who serve us statewide, I'll be at the parade. So it's not yet a hot potato for them to avoid. They'll be at the parade, and I'll be at the parade. And thanks for coming on. We'll have you on again.
Thank you. Thank you, Jim.
Dr. Luis Daniel Muñoz, he's a Democrat running for governor of Rhode Island. All right, coming up, let's review the week in politics. Plus, talk about this particular mural in Providence. Was it an overreaction or it had to go?